Hello, my name is Jamal Jones, and thank you for visiting my YouTube page. I'm a healthcare attorney that practices in the state of Florida. However, in addition to Florida law, I often discuss federal law and programs such as Medicare, the Patient Protection, and Affordable Care Act. I have a background in managed care litigation, but I focus my practice on transactional and regulatory work for individuals and corporate entities. Therefore, I consider myself a corporate transactions healthcare attorney. As such, I review, revise, and draft contracts, agreements, and documents for newly created or existing healthcare providers that will govern their relationships with other healthcare entities, business associates, or individuals. The essence of what I do is to provide you with legal advice to help your business stay within the bounds of the law, and more importantly, to help grow your business. With that being said, I am a lawyer, but I am not your lawyer, unless you have presently retained my services through a retainer agreement. This YouTube video is not intended as legal advice, it's purely educational and informational, and no attorney-client relationship shall result after watching this video. Please consult your own attorney for legal advice. If you do not have one and would like to retain my legal services, please contact me using the information listed below. All of the information and references made to laws, regulations, advisory opinions were accurate based on the law as it existed at this time that the video is being recorded. But laws are constantly evolving. Please contact me to be sure that the law which will govern your business is current. Thank you. Now, let's move on to today's topic. We're going to discuss ambulance drones, medical drones, defibrillator drones, and how they're becoming a thing. People have a love-hate relationship with drones. Some fear that the prying eye into our private lives may, have a negative effect on our day-to-day living, while others see their utility. Unfortunately, for those that wish them gone, I have to tell you that in my opinion, they're here to stay. In fact, the government is drafting various laws to protect the rights of individuals as the use of drones are rising steadily. They may seem like a thing of science fiction. I'm sure we've all seen movies where flying police robots, aka drones, are able to disperse crowds or take out targets. They serve many different functions. Drones come in all shapes, sizes, and functions, one of which is the ambulance drone, and the possibility of entrepreneurs to turn these drones into a business is ripe if they can stay within the guidelines and the confines of applicable law. Drones, or as they're sometimes called unarmed aerial vehicles, can track emergency mobile calls and use its GPS to navigate to the location where the incident is occurring. Drone pilots, these are people who control the drones, land them, have them take off and drop the payload if there is one, can observe via an integrated camera, communicate and provide support to the victims and or those who are rendering aid to the victim. It's also not far-fetched for drones to have certain life-saving apparatus, instruments, and medical supplies attached to it, aka a medical toolbox. Insulin, ECG, and EKG cardiac monitoring can transmit back to a hospital if needed. Other things such as insulin and oxygen may also be available in an ambulance drone. Of course, that all depends upon the laws of that particular state and whether they allow that type of practice to occur. You also have to look at the federal law, which is something that I address in this video, but if you'd like me to discuss it a little further, we can have either a one-on-one conversation about that, or maybe if enough people see this video and they would like for me to discuss it a little more, I can create another video that kind of delves a little further into that. Some of the downsides of having a drone and operating a drone is navigating the drone using a GPS may be wearisome to many because of the inability to detect obstacles such as trees and power lines. Even though they have a camera on board, it may not necessarily be a 360-degree camera. So the drone may get tangled or destroyed in natural hazards or man-made um, hazards as well. But in general, operating one of these devices when it's not in your field of vision is dangerous and illegal in many places. Additionally, the drones literally fly under the radar. What does that mean? That means that the FAA cannot track the drone. So at any given moment in time, you're not sure exactly how many drones are in the air and more importantly, where they are. And that is something that is a cause of concern for the FAA and other governmental bodies. And that's something that any ambulance drone or medical drone company would have to keep in mind and work alongside the government to try to, have some accountability for their drones and in terms of where they are at all times. The drones can be manually operated or pre-programmed to fly over specific routes. And again, that's where the obstacles come into play, because if it's pre-programmed to fly over a specific route and there just happens to be a barrier, an unanticipated barrier in its way, well then that can lead to potential problems and of course potential lawsuits if the drone were to destroy property or to injure someone. And that's something that of course business owners would like to avoid, hospitals and business owners. On the plus side, drones typically need very little room to land and can even drop packages from a low hover. Unlike helicopters, for example, where they need a significant amount more room to land, a drone can land on someone's balcony, for example, or on a small swath of grass. According to the Mayo Clinic, drones successfully delivered small aid packages after the Haitian earthquake in 2012. And in Papua New Guinea, Doctors Without Borders used them to transport dummy TB test samples from a remote village to a large coastal city by the name of Karima. And I think personally that that's where the advantage of ambulance and medical drones comes into play, is that hospitals and physicians and patients in hard to reach areas, remote areas, rural areas, can now get the urgent medical attention that they need, or even if it's not urgent, but just the medical attention that they need can be facilitated on a much faster basis. Those with disabilities, the elderly, can all benefit from these medical drones that can provide them with the supplies that they need in a very expeditious manner. Some examples are remote ski locations or an island that's difficult to reach by boat. We've all seen skiers that have been stuck in a mountain and the helicopter has had some difficulty getting to them. While with the medical drone, now you can drop medical supplies and provide them with a splint if it's necessary, any type of gauze that may be needed, or morphine or anything of that nature that the skier may not have taken with them on the mountain. Because of the rise in popularity for these drones, research and development that goes into their design is ramping up. And we'll see drones that are able to fly higher, travel further, while reaching higher speeds. With that being said, there are many legal issues that we simply cannot ignore, and I'm going to discuss that a little further into this video. I wanted to just kind of give a good background of drones, their utility, and the various different ways that they have been used, and how they can evolve to be used in the months and years to come. Smart ambulance drone operators or pilots or business entities, in my opinion, will not sell the device. Instead, they will lease them. and enter into exclusive agreements where maintenance on that drone has to be handled by the supplier. The benefit of this for the supplier is that it's a constant flow of business to you, the supplier. You lease the drone for X amount of dollars a month, and should the contract or the agreement come to an end, you can take your drone back and you can supply it to another uh, lessee. And you can keep doing that and servicing it, and you really can capitalize and make, a decent amount of money, depending on the number of drones that you have and how often they need servicing. But that's entirely up to you. But that's something that you may want to consider as a business owner when it comes to these drones. Um, One student, a Dutch student that I was reading about recently, actually created a flying defibrillator that's capable of reaching victims within minutes. Now, that is still, he's pretty much developed the drone, but according to the laws in the Netherlands, he's been unable to really kind of put it in motion just yet. And it hasn't made its way to hospitals and other healthcare providers, but I imagine that in the not too distant future that that's something that we'll be seeing more of, because cardiac issues is something that faces a lot of Americans and Europeans and Africans and people all over the world. And I think that it would be a very useful device for people to take advantage of throughout the years. In fact, the American Heart Association estimates that about 360,000 people in the United States had a cardiac arrest last year. Less than 10% of those people survived. One of the major reasons for their grim fate is that the first responders with defibrillators that can shock the heart back to life can't get to them in time. Of course, an alternative is an automatic external defibrillator, or an AED. The goal with these drones is to stabilize the victim until more advanced medical personnel and support arrives and transports the patient to a hospital. Again, these drones can be outfitted with different payloads depending on the size of the drone and its capacity, its weight capacity. I mean, sky's the limit, no pun intended, in terms of the medical supplies that these drones can carry to victims or healthcare subscribers or patients. Rural areas, as I previously said, such as places in Rwanda and Amsterdam, are all benefiting from the ambulance drones. Typical commercial style drones of this sort will carry a price tag of around $10,000, carry a 5-pound payload, and fly for about 30 to 60 minutes with a range of 20 to 60 miles. But again, drones come in various different shapes and sizes. So some drones may be able to fly higher, they may have a larger payload, and it might be able to fly further distances. It all depends on the drone. And of course, the price tag is going to vary. It may range from 10,000, it can go up to 25 or 50,000. It really all depends on how sophisticated the drone is. Excuse me. And this will just alleviate so many problems for those living in rural areas that do not have access to high quality medical care. Not all of their problems, but just some of the problems with access to pharmaceutical supplies and other types of DME supplies. The United States Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is pretty much the agency that governs drones. They run the show as of right now. The states would like to think otherwise, but for right now, the FAA and its equivalent in other countries have to grant special drone exemptions when used for medical purposes. The FAA effectively bans drone deliveries. The FAA's proposed drone rules, which were made final this year, prohibits flights over people in cities and beyond the sight of drone operators. The FAA released a fact sheet that outlined the agency's authority over the skies. They do not want the states to interfere with their authority. And according to the FAA, 45 states have considered some sort of drone law in 2015. Now today, January 6, 2016, that may change. States are really trying to get in on the act, and I will discuss how they are in a few minutes. But basically, they're trying to take over the enforcement side of the drone legislation. State and local legislators might have been confused about who ruled the drones in the skies, because although the FAA is charged with regulating navigable airspace and the aircraft within it, it is also said it didn't regulate model aircrafts, which until very recently seemed to include all recreational drones. In the absence of clear federal rules, it's understandable why communities would want to rein in a nuisance low-flying aircrafts with their own rules. The FAA currently requires a special permit to fly a drone for commercial purposes, and of course, if you're a healthcare entity looking to establish an ambulance or medical drone, more likely than not, you're going to be considered a commercial business, thus using the drone for a commercial purpose. And those types of permits for commercial purposes are relatively difficult to obtain at this point in time. I foresee that that will change in months to come, or maybe even years to come, but more likely than not months to come. So as of this year, the FAA has passed regulations that has made it, or rather the end of last year, December 2015, which makes it easier for drones to be used by farmers to monitor crops, power companies to check the integrity of electrical grid, and realtors to snap bird's eye view pictures or videos of their listed properties. Again, what these rules don't allow for is for the drones to be operated outside of the line of sight of the operator, the pilot of these drones, which is essential to cargo moving drones such as ambulance and medical drones. So that's a nuance that really needs to be worked on, and I think that the FAA is really concerned with accountability should something happen to go wrong with the cargo. The U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx announced that the federal government will have an online registration system in place for drones. Everyone with a drone that weighs more than half a pound, up to 55 pounds, including any payload, such as a camera, keep that in mind, is required to register with the FAA, pay a $5 fee, which I think may go up in time, and affix a tail number to the drone. Drone owners who are 13 and older will have to register on an FAA website that becomes available, or rather that became available, starting on December 21st. At this time, it's not sure whether the registration licensing will differ whether the operator is an individual or a commercial entity. Registration must be renewed every 3 years. Recreational flyers can register as many aircraft as they want on one registration number. This is all an attempt by the government and the FAA to promote safety and responsibility. The FAA prohibits drones and model airplanes from flying higher than 400 feet or within 5 miles of an airport. Again, this is all about safety. You don't want the drones flying too high because it may interfere with airplanes. And of course, you don't want them to fly within a 5-mile radius of the airports because they may also interfere with the airplanes. And that also poses a bit of a problem for the for the ambulance drone and the medical drones, because if they are pre-programmed, how do you pre-program it to avoid certain areas? that is something that the business owners and the ambulance drone pilots will really kind of have to come up with a solution for. Um, and sometimes planes go off course for one reason or another. You also need to be able to account for that. Safety and security is of the utmost importance because if one of these drones gets sucked up into an engine, that can be catastrophic in a major, major way. State legislatures across the country are debating if and how drone technology should be regulated. Taking into account the benefits of their use, privacy concerns, and the potential economic impact, several states have enacted laws, as previously stated, addressing drone issues. Common issues addressed in the legislation include defining what a UAS, UAV, or a drone is, how they can be used by law enforcement or other state agencies, how they can be used by the general public, and regulations for their use in hunting game. The Airline Pilots Association, a union representing 52,000 pilots, has urged a national registry so that when a drone collides with a passenger plane, authority can trace the drone debris back to its owner, which is one of the reasons why the FAA implemented having a registration number fixed to the drone so that it can be traced back to the owner and the operator and the pilot of that drone. Airline pilots have reported an increase of drones around airports as they're taking off or landing. FAA officials now say reports of such incidents number about 100 a month, which is on pace to more than quadruple the 238 incidents reported in 2014. Again, can't stress enough that these drones really should not be operated within 5 miles of an airport. But what happens if a hospital is within 5 miles of an airport, or a clinic or pharmacy is within 5 miles of an airport? What are the exceptions? What are the laws? How are the laws going to provide exemptions or exceptions to these companies, to the hospitals and pharmacies and clinics that want to utilize drones, but they are within the area that they are prohibited from working within? All operations conducted in civil airspace must meet minimum levels of safety. Public drone operators have the ability to self-certify their equipment and personnel, but civil operators are certified by the FAA. Now, when we say public, we mean public entities, government entities, the FAA, NASA, so on and so forth. Civil operators would be hospitals, physician groups, pain clinics, so on and so forth. They believe that civil operators will benefit from the collaboration between the FAA and the public operators. Presently, the FAA is drafting a rule to address small drone operators. News media use of drones is not for hobby or recreational purposes, so the FAA authorization is necessary. Media organizations may hire a company that already has a Section 333 exemption. That company would have to apply for and obtain a certificate of waiver or authorization, or a COA, to fly in a particular block of airspace. Media organizations may also apply for their own Section 333 exemptions. You can go to the FAA website to see how one would go about obtaining them. Under 49 United States Code 40103, the United States government has exclusive sovereignty of airspace of the United States, and the FAA has the authority to prescribe air traffic regulations on the flight of aircraft, including drones. Whether the federal law preempts state or local requirements for drones depends on the precise nature of those requirements. The Department of Transportation evaluates these laws and requirements on a case-by-case basis to make sure that they don't conflict with the FAA's authority to provide safe and efficient use of U.S. airspace. Any operation that does not meet the statutory criteria for a public aircraft operation is considered to be a civil aircraft operation and must be conducted in accordance with all FAA regulations applicable to the operation. There are presently two methods of gaining FAA authorization to fly civil, non-governmental drones. Number one, as previously mentioned, there's a Section 333 exemption. A grant of exemption in accordance with Section 333 and a civil certificate of waiver or authorization. This process may be used to perform civil operations in low-risk, controlled environments. Instructions for filing a petition for an exemption are available at the FAA's website. The second method is a special airworthiness certificate, or an SAC. Applicants must be able to describe how their system is designed, constructed, and manufactured, including engineering processes, software development and control, configuration management, and quality assurance procedures used, along with how and where they intend to fly. SAC in experimental categories may be used for civil aircraft to perform research and development, crew training, and market surveys. However, carrying persons or property for compensation or hire is prohibited at this time. FAA Order 8130.34 is used by FAA inspectors to issue experimental airworthiness certificates and special flight permits to UAS. If the FAA determines that the project does not present an unreasonable safety risk, the local FAA manufacturing inspection district office will issue an SAC in the experimental category with operating limitations applicable to that particular drone. A UAS, or a drone type and airworthiness certificate in the restricted category for a special purpose, or a type certificate for production of the UAS under 14 Code of Federal Regulations Section 21.25A1 is available. Again, for more information, you contact your local aircraft certification office. Just to kind of rehash for a minute what the regulations are as of December 21st, according to the FAA. If you are granted a permit to fly your drone, you have to keep the altitude below 400 feet. It must remain in sight at all times. Never fly near any manned aircraft, especially near airports, within 5 miles. Never fly over a group of people, stadiums, or sporting events without appropriate permitting and permission, and never fly near any emergency response efforts. So as I said again, as of December 21st, 2015, all drone operators have to register online. And in preparation for registering online, each drone owner must provide his or her name, their home address, and email address, so that in the event that an incident does occur, or an accident occurs with the drone, that the responsible parties can be contacted. Now, upon completion of registration, the web application will generate a certificate of aircraft registration, proof of ownership, that will include a unique identification number for the drone owner, which must be marked on the aircraft. Whether it's a personal, whether it's commercial, or an ambulance or medical drone, they will all have to have this unique number. Now, let's look at how the Florida, because I am based here in Florida, let's look at how the Florida statutes kind of take a look at drones, and let's apply that to medical and ambulance drones. Under Florida statute section 934.50, which is called the Freedom from Unwarranted Surveillance Act, drone means a powered aerial vehicle that does not carry a human operator, uses aerodynamic forces to provide vehicle lift, and flies autonomously or is piloted remotely, can be expendable or recoverable, and can carry a lethal or non-lethal payload. Several exceptions exist, including to deliver cargo, if the person or entity using a drone for this purpose is operating in compliance with FAA regulations. Now, let's say that there is an incident, there are certain remedies available. An aggrieved party may initiate a civil action for compensatory damages for violations of this section and may seek injunctive relief to prevent future violations of this section against a person, state entity, or political subdivision. The prevailing party is entitled to recover reasonable attorney's fees from the non-prevailing party based on the actual and reasonable time expended by his or her attorney, billed at an appropriate hourly rate, and in cases in which the payment of such a fee is contingent on the outcome without a multiplier unless the action is tried to the verdict, in which case a multiplier of up to twice the actual value of the time expended may be awarded in the discretion of the court. Punitive damages may also be available. So again, companies who are operating these drones are not going to get away with, oh, well, this was just a mistake. We didn't mean to destroy your property. We didn't mean to injure you. The state legislature in Florida is making it very clear that if an accident does occur, that there are several remedies available to the injured party or the harmed party, which includes an injunctive relief, punitive damages, or any other damages that may be available to that party, which can add up to quite a pretty penny. It can be a lot of money depending on the severity of the damages suffered. There, on the plus side, as of right now, there are no criminal penalties attached to the law. None. But of course, there are the financial damages that may result. A recent study estimated that almost 40% of businesses could be using drones in fewer than 5 years. Insurers do not want to miss the opportunity and are developing insurance products for drone operators, even though the FAA has just issued final government regulations and will be presumably expanding on those in the near future. So keep an eye out for that, for ambulance drones and medical drones, that insurers are already catching wind of this, and you may want to communicate with your insurer, or if you're a business owner and you're thinking of getting into it, this may be something that you may want to look a little further at. And of course, if you have any legal questions regarding this, you can reach out to me, you can call me, or you can email me, and I'll provide you with an answer to any questions that you may have. Now, Florida's statute doesn't differentiate between a drone if it's used for commercial or personal purposes. Case law with regards to drones will be especially important for ambulance drone operators, medical drone operators, even the insurance companies that are insuring these ambulance and medical drones. It still remains to be seen how Florida courts will interpret this Florida statute regarding drones, because no litigation regarding this issue has come up yet. But at some point, you will see some cases regarding this. Just to put it in perspective, an estimated 1.6 million drones were sold in 2015 in America. Use of drones have caused no known deaths in America in 2015, but I'm expecting at least one of those numbers to rise, and hopefully it's only the number of drones that are being purchased and sold, and not the number of incidents or injuries or fatalities as a result of them. Recently, now on the local level, if we take a look at Miami, commissioners a few weeks ago considered legislation that would restrict the use of drones over and around stadiums and large gatherings, such as football games or a Calle Ocho festival. The proposed law by Commissioner Frank Carollo also wanted to bar hobbyists from flying drones heavier than 5 pounds, 5 pounds, pretty small, and ban the use of drones with detachable cargo or weapons. Again, that was focused on just hobbyists. That wouldn't apply to ambulance drone or medical drone because that's a commercial purpose, not a hobby or a personal purpose. Commissioner Carollo said that the litigation was to mirror the federal regulations, but he wanted to give the city the power to enforce. That's the big thing that a lot of local governments are hinging on. It's like, great, the FAA has proposed promulgated these rules, but how is it going to be enforced? Who is going to enforce it? And various different states and cities and counties across the United States feel like it's up to them to enforce it. And given the limitations on the FAA's ability to patrol on the local level, as a small drone aircraft becomes increasingly popular and inexpensive, they feel that patrol needs to come from more local authorities. Minutes before the start of the vote, Mr. Commissioner, Carollo's plan on the rules, lawyers from the FAA called Mr. Carollo. The lawyer said that the Miami ordinance needed to make clear that the FAA had ultimate control over the airspace. Period. No questions asked. It was not a local or even a state control. And of course, Mr. Carollo, not wanting to delay the vote, complied. He deleted any requirements about permitting that would have duplicated those by the FAA before getting the law approved unanimously by the City Council. Enforceability still remains an area of concern even after this has been passed. If it's criminalized, how will it be a misdemeanor? What's to look forward to? What kind of penalties? What are the repercussions that are going to be imposed upon someone for any criminal violations? That's something, again, that remains to be seen, but I'm sure that if we track this, that's something that will be shed more light on in months to come. So I will keep an eye on that, and I will try to pass that information along as needed, as it becomes available. On December 17th, the FAA released a fact sheet on federal laws that would preempt local rules. Because the FAA, as previously stated, was given that authority by Congress, the agency said that many local or state drone rules would not stand up to a legal challenge, which is a fact, which is why states are trying to carve out this enforcement aspect of it and leaving everything else, such as the registration and how high the drones can fly and where they can fly for the most part, up to the FAA. Whereas the city is regulating the use of the drones within a half-mile radius around and or over large venues, special events and public parks and public facilities, including but not limited to parks, stadiums, open spaces, plazas, streets, etc., that attract large groups of people. And whereas this ordinance is not intended to preempt the FAA rules, but to operate in conjunction with those rules to promote public safety while recognizing the limitations in the FAA's enforcement capabilities. Was pulled directly from the Miami ordinance. The ordinance also said that in all other areas of the city, the city of Miami, the following restrictions apply. A. Drones may not be larger than 5 pounds, including any attachments, and may not be equipped with detachable cargo, releasable payload, or any device equipped to carry a weapon. Any modification to a UAS must be pursuant to FAA approval and registered via the city's permitting process. B. Drones over 5 pounds may be operated only by a registered member of the Academy of Model Aeronautics, or the AMA, if the operator is subjected to and complying with AMA rules. Notwithstanding the weight limit, all other provisions of this section shall apply. Now, just to highlight a few things that I think are important in the December 15, 2015 FAA fact sheet, as we're nearing an end to this video. Unmanned aircraft systems, again, drones, that's just an alternate name for it, or aircraft subject to regulation by the FAA to ensure safety of flight and safety of people and property on the ground. States and local jurisdictions are increasingly exploring regulations of drones or proceeding to enact legislation to drone operations. This fact sheet is intended to provide basic information about the federal regulatory framework for use by states and localities when considering laws affecting drones. States and local restrictions affecting drone operations should be consistent with the extensive federal statutory and regulatory framework pertaining to control of that airspace, flight management and efficiency, air traffic control, aviation safety, navigational facilities, and the regulation of aircraft noise at its source. Consistent with its statutory authority, the FAA is requiring federal regulations of drones in order to operate a drone. Registering the drone will help promote public safety in the air and on the ground, aid the FAA in enforcement of safety-related requirements for the operation of drones, and build a culture of accountability and responsibility among users operating U.S. airspace. No state or local drone registration law may relieve a drone operator or owner from complying with the federal drone registration requirements. Because federal registration is the exclusive means for registering drones for purposes of operating an aircraft in navigable airspace, no state or local government may impose an additional registration requirement on the operation of drones in navigable airspace without first obtaining FAA approval. Finally, if one or more municipalities enacted ordinances regulating drones in the navigable airspace and made a significant number of municipalities that follow suit, fractionalized control of the navigable airspace could result. In turn, this patchwork quilt of differing restrictions could severely limit the flexibility of FAA in controlling the airspace and flight patterns and ensuring safety and efficient air traffic flow. A navigable airspace free from inconsistent state and local restrictions is essential to the maintenance of a safe and sound air transportation system. So, I think that I've pretty much covered a lot. This video, is about 40 minutes long, but I think that it was pretty informative. And I, tried to go over several times the issues that I thought were of particular importance and that you need to focus on. I left a lot of things out. I really didn't talk about any prohibitions on dispensing of certain types of prescription drugs via a drone, or certain HIPAA requirements or HIPAA concerns with regards to patient information. That's something that I can do provided in an analysis in some form of memorandum. That'll probably be a bit time consuming, but it's something that I'd be more than happy to look into if you contact me. So I'm gonna end the video right here, and I hope that this was helpful to you.